This is called Elevators, and that name was chosen entirely at random. I just felt it for the track. So, this track took me a while to make, and you may have noticed some similarities between it and Pursuit of Happiness. That is for two reasons. First of all, I actually made this track before Pursuit of Happiness, and then wanted to go for the same sort of thing. But the big reason they're similar is because they are part of a new project I'm working on, which I will tell you more details about later. But they're both part of that same project. So let's go into the making of this thing. Start off with the intro. So the writing of the song actually started off, I took a little time, went down to my church actually, and I was allowed a couple hours just to kind of play around on the piano, and there was no one else there, so it was just me on the piano. And so I spent some time on the piano just trying to come up with stuff and stumbled upon this kind of little chord progression melody thing, which I'll play. And I brought my iPod with me so I could film it, and that way I'd be able to remember whatever ideas I came up with. So I ended up with this. And brought that home, sat on it for a while, and decided, you know what, I think I should turn this into something. I think that could go somewhere. So then I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to get this track right. It's kind of crazy because I can make a song like Uncanny Valley or Reasons or one of those that's the kind of bass heavy electro house kind of thing relatively quickly, but then something like the Electro Pop sort of thing, for some reason it's really hard for me to do. I don't know why. Just something about it is a little against the way my brain works, I guess. But I'm very happy with how this came out. It took a lot of frustration, a lot of trying to get this right. But once I got it, I'm super pumped with how it turned out. So let's start off with the intro. And first of all, I have just the chords. And that is rendered down to audio because I used, I believe, a contact sample thing. It was like a sampled piano, and it was on a demo thing, so I could only use it for like 15 minutes at a time or something, so I had to render it out to be able to keep it. So that's just kind of what I had to do. I already had the chord progression and the BPM and everything set in stone, so I didn't worry too much about it, so I was okay with just bouncing it down to audio. So I start off with that. Then the thing actually playing the melody. And that's this little plugin I found called Forefront Piano. It's pretty good. I like it. It's doesn't sound super legit, but I think I actually made it, when you combine it with all the other stuff I did, I think it actually works pretty well. It's also got some compression on it. And some reverb. Using the space reverb. The room reverb. And then the low piano, which is the same plugin. And as you may have noticed, those are panned. This one's panned a little to the left, this one's panned a little to the right. So just by themselves, sounds pretty legit. And then you add in the chords to fill it out a bit. In my opinion, that sounds pretty legit, and it at least gets the job done and gets the melody across. Which you may have noticed the difference between this and the piano track, like when I recorded the piano just to get the idea down, is that when I recorded the piano just to get the idea down, I played the full chords. And on this, I really isolated out what I thought the melody was and isolated that out into one track and then have the bass track, and then the chords are really just kind of filling it out. So it was better to have it really as a distinct melody as opposed to just kind of mixed in with all the chords, and that took a while of finagling to get that exactly the way I like it. So we hop into the, I guess, verse. It would serve the same purpose. Like, you could put a vocal track here, except I couldn't think of anything, so I did not. So what I did was I have a high cut filter on the piano bus. So basically what that is doing, I'll just solo piano here, is it's taking the entire piano and cutting the highs. So here's the intro. And that's just automated in, and then slowly automates away as the track goes on. And creates some nice movement. And also kind of gets out of the way and becomes a background element so the pads and the other stuff can come in. So here's the pad. It's a massive patch. Then a little electric piano track playing the melody once again. A A very simple saw bass with a high cut on it. And then, of course, the main thing providing movement is the plucks. And these are the same plucks as were used in Pursuit of Happiness. And they also have a high cut that's automated to open up. And then we have a second pluck over here. Oh, no, that's the super saw. Okay, I'll get into that in a second. Let me see if I automated. Yes, I did. Indeed, I did. The cutoff as well. Also automated the cutoff on the verse plucks. So they open up. It's a very common technique in electronic music, especially some of like the progressive and electro house styles, is to open up the filter and such like. So then we got a couple claps layered. That's the main one. Little 808 clap layered in there, and then the hi-hat. Ride. And then I'm gonna go ahead and jump into this first drop section and then back into the other parts. So here's the drop. So first of all, we've got the main saw that's doing most of the heavy lifting. And that is just a massive patch. It's basically a super saw. So it's a pretty simple effect to get. And then the other thing is this bass. Also a massive patch. And also have this bass. And then the low bass. So really, the emphasis is actually more on the bass than the super saw. Even though the super saw is providing the majority of the tone, you've got these kind of distorted, heavy basses down here. And that's actually providing a lot of the power. If it was just the super saw, it would be super weak sauce. So we got all that. And then finally, the melody piano makes its return. And that's basically a duplicated version of the earlier one, except with some really extreme EQ on it to emphasize the highs to have it cut through nicely. Then we got the kick, which I'll just show you the drums separately here. Fairly standard kick. I've used this particular sample quite a bit. And a snare, and that's just got a little reverb on it and a little bit of EQ. Nothing too extreme. And then finally, the real drums. And they're not actually real drums. They're just the built-in drums thing in Logic. Except I did modify it quite a bit to get the sound I was going for. So here's the part with the cymbals. And so that interacts with the drums. So real quick, I'll build this up and then I'll show you what I did for the wubs. Are pretty simple. Those are mainly from samples, but then I process them in some ways. So we start with the saw, add the bass, add the kick. And notice every time the kick comes in, that's when the synths come in as well. So the kick snare, the next bass, the other bass, adding a little tone, the piano. That's doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the tone, really. And that's basically it. And then finally for the basses, this one's... Did I do much to it? I bit crushed it and phased it, so here's the original sample. It's from a Seamless R sample pack. And then added a bit crusher and a phaser, so you get... just to kind of push it over the edge. And then this... Also another bass one-shot. And I didn't really do anything to that at all. And then this last one over here. I had the same bit crusher, the same phaser. And that's this right here. Alright, that's basically it for that part. And then we move into the full drop. That's a lot of the same elements, the same kick, the same hi-hats, the same everything pretty much, except I have a few things different. I now have the bass with a little arp on it, so now it goes. And then it's side-chained as well. With my trusty LFO tool plugin. And then we got, once again, doing most of the heavy lifting. And then a couple other things, some of the little stuff that breaks in. You notice I have very intentional breaks in the synths, and that leaves a little room for it to breathe. If it's just like all pumping synths the whole time, it actually tends to, I don't know, it tends to get less exciting. You kind of lose the vibe. And so to have it broken up in little bits, it is really effective. And then I have another bass shot over here to break it up. The real drums come back. And then down here, the snare makes its return for one thing. And then the tambourine. The shaker. Adding some movement and percussion, adding to the kind of pop-like feel. And then finally, this little element, which I just have to show off because I like it. This little guy in one of the breaks. And that's basically just a massive patch with a ridiculous amount of vibrato on it. That's basically it for that drop. Then the second breakdown is very similar to the first one, except with a couple added elements. Oh, I was going to go back into the supersaw. Okay, I'll do that real quick. So in the verse, so to speak, the way that I got this to lead in is, first of all, you have a lot of the same elements, so things like the piano and the drums all stay the same. But then also one of the things that led into it to make that transition smooth was this supersaw automated to mesh with the supersaw over here. So that is this patch right here. It's a massive patch that I built. So I basically have an EQ on here with, it starts off low and it lifts. I'll show you. And that's basically acts as a riser and transitions from this kind of chill section into this high energy section. And then finally we have the second drop, which is significantly different from the first one, obviously. So the plucks make their triumphant return. And let's see if I can find them here. So I basically have the supersaw here, but it's the same supersaw and the same chord progression, but it's way quieter. And also a second one. And that's side chained, and that's the exact same plucks. So here's what it's like without them, without the side chaining. So real quick, I'm just gonna build this up piece by piece. So that's basically that, and then the final touch is, so far the song has been at the same chord progression for the entire duration of the song, and then the tambourines come back as well. The song has been at the same chord progression for the whole time, and it's in the key V, but it's never once resolved either. So finally I transitioned in this last section. All the same elements, just playing a different chord progression, once again still never hitting the root note E, and then finally on this very last note it finally hits the E. Because that's the thing about, if you're new to this kind of thing, the thing about working with, in any key, it always wants to go back to the root note. And so that's one way to build tension, is to not go back to the root note, instead kind of move around it. And so then when you finally come back to it, it's like this release. And so this new chord progression was kind of an attempt at building a little bit of tension, and so when you finally hit the root note for the first and last time in the song, it gives you kind of this release of tension. And then from there, it's an outro with just a high-passed kick and all that kind of stuff. Alrighty, that's it for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and if you produce music, found it helpful for your own productions, I'm Gabe, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace out.